The Exotic Wildlife Association presents this week's outdoor hero, Kevin Reid from the Marani River Ranch.
Blame it on Texas. Don't blame it on me.
Broadcasting live and syndicated worldwide via the Westwood One XDS satellite platform. It's America's favorite blend of outdoors and commentary. This is Alan Warren Outdoors.
So let's start hour number 2, everybody. Welcome to what has become the voice of stewards and those who believe in conservation. I am Alan Warren, broadcasting from here in San Antonio, Texas, and this is Alan Warren Outdoors. I know it's been a few days since the World Series finished up, but how about them Cubs?
I'm glad that my sleeping has finally got back to normal.
I'll tell you, I am not a baseball fan, but I was a fan of the World Series, and I think people are still celebrating there in Chicago.
Yeah.
So what a
Till
great
spring training, they'll be celebrating.
You know what's so cool about the baseball fans or the players? They seem to really be having fun.
Yeah.
They get along, they have fun, and it was just a great series. So congratulations, and the Indians are a great team. Watch out for them next year.
Very good.
Hey, a special good morning to our friends out listening in Oregon right now. I just learned that a subject that's near and dear to my heart is actually on the ballot for this coming Tuesday, and it's about outdoor education and outdoor education classes for kiddos in school. Now, on this ballot, you're going to see it listed as Measure 99. It's where they're taking $22 million, or proposing to take $22 million out of the state lottery fund, and they're going to send every single 5th or 6th grader to an outdoor school camping for an entire week. So that is, I think, a very, very cool deal. It's, again, Measure 99. If it passes, it would make Oregon the only state with statewide dedicated funding for outdoor education, including students in charter and private and home schools. For y'all who have been listening to the show for quite a while, you know I'm a strong supporter of outdoor education classes nationwide, but especially here in Texas. So I give a big old 2 thumbs up to the Oregon legislators that are supporting Measure 99. Everybody out there in the Beaver State next Tuesday, look for Measure 99 on the ballot and consider voting yes. All right, later in the hour, we're going to be joined by Charlie Seal of the Exotic Wildlife Association, and he has some very good news to share in terms of a court decision regarding what we call the 3 species. So we'll let Charlie explain it a little bit later on. As you know, each week we introduce our audience to what we call an outdoor hero, somebody that we believe is an excellent example of stewardship and conservation. They're an outdoor hero or a conservation hero, and they rarely get the recognition they deserve. So before we bring up this hour's outdoor hero, I want you to know that literally 100% of the people that we choose to put on the show and call them outdoor heroes are so humble, they're almost embarrassed that we use the term hero. And I think that's because, well, they view the things they do as just perfectly normal every single day and their responsibility. So all that said, let's welcome this morning's outdoor hero from about 80 miles or so west of San Antonio, my friend Kevin Reid. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing great this morning. And for people who don't know you, Kevin Reid, and the Marani River Ranch, give everybody a little bit of an overview and background on you and what you do for wildlife.
Well, I grew up in Texas, in Austin particularly, with the University of Texas, and make my home now in San Antonio. And I've always been very passionate about wildlife. I've been a hunter since I was a very young child. My grandfather was a hunter. My dad was a hunter. Always spent a ton of time outdoors, camping, fishing, just really enjoying wildlife from early stages of my life. And living in Texas, it's paradise. And one of the things I got hooked on early on was exotics. I just couldn't believe that here in Texas we had all these animals from all over the world. It was just, incredible because you didn't have to travel anywhere. You could literally see animals from Africa right here in your backyard in Texas. So 15 years ago, we purchased the Marani River Ranch, which is just north of Uvalde on the Nueces River. Absolutely stunning property. And we basically started a conservation and breeding preserve to start to raise a lot of these species. And when I say a lot, we're now up to about 80 So out of those 80, there's about 20 of them that are threatened, endangered, or extinct, which sounds really funny to people. How do you have extinct animals on your ranch? And the way that we define the extinct animals, that means they're extinct in their native habitat. So there's a whole lot of these species, scimitar horned oryx, dama gazelles, addax.
And Kevin, explain why they are extinct or on the verge of extinction in their native land.
You know, Alan, it's typically a combination of factors. It could be loss of habitat. It could be poaching by indigenous people that, you know, basically that's their only food source. It could be through, you know, prolonged drought. It could be, there's lots of different factors that can contribute to the extinction of a species in its native habitat. I think one of the things most people don't realize is that years ago, back in the late 20s and early 30s, there was a bunch of Texas landowners, private landowners, that actually shipped a lot of these species over to Texas. They brought them from Africa, they brought them from their native habitats, and they put them on their ranches here. And the primary goal was they wanted something to hunt besides whitetail.
How crazy do you think people thought those people were?
Oh yeah, and then you fast forward, and probably the best story I can give you is the scimitar horned oryx. Back in 1977, there were 4,000 of them estimated in their native habitat, and we ended up with about 27 of them here in Texas. So let's fast forward to today, and they're extinct in their native habitat, and Texas has 15,000 of that species.
Unbelievable. Well, Kevin, I know you said that you grew up fishing and hunting, and I guess many of the people listening to the show did grow up as a hunter. Tell me how you made the transition from hunter to conservationist, and what caused that? What internal motivation did you have to go, you know what, I'm going to do more than just hunt, but I'm going to actually become somebody that's a steward? How did that happen?
You know, I think, you know, for me, I traveled to Africa when I was pretty young. I was fortunate enough, and I'm a bow hunter, so I did a lot of bow hunting in Africa. And I'll never forget the impact that Africa had on me. And you could see the indigenous people that worked side by side with the safari operators, and in the areas where there was a relationship that was mutually beneficial, where those indigenous people basically profited. They could see a benefit to preserving the habitat, to preserving the animals. So instead of running cattle or tearing up the wildlife habitat to plant lettuce, you know, they saw value in the wildlife. They started to protect the wildlife. And that's when I realized that the symbiotic relationship between human beings on the planet and the wildlife, and I'm not talking about people that are living in a condominium in New York City. I'm talking about the people that live next door every single day with these iconic species. And this light bulb came on, and it said, look, if we're going to save those species, we've got to save those people. We've got to create a way to motivate those people to protect the habitat and to protect those species and make that their highest and best use of their time. And when we do that, it works. And you can see it all over Africa where that happens. You can see where the wildlife preserved. And then you have places like Kenya where they've outlawed hunting, even for indigenous people. And over the last, you know, since the mid-'70s, they've lost almost 70% of all of the wildlife because it has no value to those indigenous people because it can't be utilized.
You know, when they privatized wildlife in South Africa, the explosion in terms of the number of animals it's off the scale. It went from, you know, people had this fantasy 100 years ago that there was wildlife everywhere. That wasn't the case. But today there is wildlife everywhere in South Africa. I mean, like 15 to 20 million animals estimated in South Africa, and it's due to privatization of the wildlife, I believe.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Alan, and people just need to understand there's a basic human fact that anything that doesn't have value is not going to be preserved or protected. They're just not going to spend the time and energy on it. And if it does have value, and I remember sitting across the fire from a tracker having this conversation, and my outfitter was translating in Swahili. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, I don't care if it's the last rhino on the planet. If my 16 children are starving, I'm going to kill it.
And that is a very sobering thing to hear. Hey, folks, we're talking with this hour's outdoor hero, my friend from the Marani River Ranch, Mr. Kevin Reid. Very passionate, very involved in wildlife, conservation, and stewardship. This is the Alan Warren Outdoors Radio Show. Coming up, we're going to ask Kevin, how do you balance the message of conservation with killing animals? It seems to kind of contradict each other. So y'all stick around. Kevin Reid and I will be right back. All right, folks, it's 21 minutes after the hour, and welcome back to Alan Warren Outdoors. We're visiting with this hour's outdoor hero, Mr. Kevin Reid from the Marani River Ranch here in Texas. And Kevin, I wanted to ask you, I think I understand the connection between the urge to save animals and fight to protect habitat and be a good steward, balanced with being a hunter as well. How do you explain that to people that don't understand?
You know, Alan, that's probably the question I get the most, because at the Marani River Ranch, we hunt, and that is a major source, a primary source of our revenue. The secondary source for our revenue is selling live offspring, the females. So anytime that you have an animal population, it has to be managed to keep it in balance with the habitat. And one of the things that people forget is that, you know, when animals start having babies, 50% of them are males and 50% are females. Well, in a lot of the species, you only need one male for, 20 or 30 females, like the African hoofstock. Mm-hmm. So you have excess males that are really adding no biological value to that herd. And so that's the opportunity to generate revenue that really supports a whole bunch of other species. So hunting, to me, has been and always will be our most efficient management tool for keeping herds in balance. Nobody else has come up with a better way to manage those herds. And it's a humane way. It's quick. The other thing people forget about is if that animal is not hunted, how does it die? It doesn't go to an old folks' home.
Because it is going to die.
It's going to die, and it's not going to lay down and just go to sleep. It's going to either starve to death, a long, prolonged death, if it lives long enough to starve to death, or it's going to be eaten alive. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather be shot quickly than have either one of those things happen to me. So,
talk to me, Kevin, about the personal gratification that you get when you see animals on your Marani River Ranch, that babies that are being born. What does that feel like for you? Do you ever get tired of it? Does it give you give you goosebumps? What is it like to see these animals that are literally extinct in their native land, but you got 80 species of them there out by Uvalde?
Well, I can tell you, Alan, it never gets old. It's always exciting. We've formed a venture with a lot of different facilities all over the country, and we've become renowned for our success breeding some animals that are very difficult to breed, and we've been hugely successful. So people come and visit us, and they want to know how we're doing it. But the most rewarding thing for me in our career in the 15 years is we have now started shipping those excess animals, like the scimitar horned oryx I was telling you earlier. We are now shipping them back to their native land. We are reestablishing those herds in Senegal and in Chad in Africa. And as you know, Alan, because you've traveled with me over to South Africa on our Rhino Forever project, where we're doing the opposite. We're trying to ship rhinos from Africa to big Texas ranches to get them away from the poachers. So we're doing the opposite there. We're bringing them this way, but now we're taking this resource that we've created over, 40, 50 years here in Texas, and we're giving them back to where those animals came from originally. And I get goosebumps talking about that to you right now.
Kevin, tell me, how much government money are you getting to move these animals back and forth with our friends over there in South Africa?
That's funny. Zero.
Zero.
Everything that we do is done with private dollars by private ranchers that are extremely passionate about wildlife, and they're passionate about wildlife conservation. And the captive breeding and high fences get a bad name, but I'm telling you right now, the value that they bring, especially here in the state of Texas, not only to the people of the state of Texas, but to the wildlife of the planet Earth, is unmeasurable.
Because if we didn't have private landowners that had a heart for wildlife and conservation like you, Kevin Reid, many of these animals would be extinct forever. They'd simply be a memory, like the dinosaurs.
Yeah, they'd already be gone. And you said something earlier today. These are people that they're not looking for credit. I think one of our biggest problems is we don't tell our story. When I tell people what we do at the Marani and they come out and see it, I don't care if they're a non-hunter, an anti-hunter, they get it immediately. They see the value of what we're doing immediately. I mean, it's so obvious, but they just don't know it because we don't tell our story. We're not about going out and suing people. We're not about public grandstanding. We're about wildlife. The motto that I always use is wildlife first. If you're going to put wildlife first, I will work with you. I don't care what your political affiliation is. I don't care what your ideology is. If you're willing to put wildlife first, I will partner with you to figure out what's in the wildlife's best interest.
Now, we were talking about getting animals, moving them back and forth from the United States over back to Africa and back and forth. Talk to me about the process. That's got to be extremely time-consuming and frustrating, I would think, for people like you who are trying to help wildlife, and it's one roadblock of paperwork after another. Or am I off base here?
Well, there's only one way you can do it, and that's by having great partners. So the Sahara Conservation Fund and John Newby is our partner in those Sahara conservation projects. And so you've got someone that's in Chad, someone that's in Senegal, that's working that side of the transfer. So they're getting permits, they're getting approvals, they're laying the groundwork for laws to protect the species once they're there. If you didn't have that, it's just not going to work. And it's like our rhino project. We have the Wildlife Ranchers Association of South Africa that's our partner with the EWA and the Second Arc Foundation in Texas and the United States. So those partnerships are what allow this to happen. And there's so many people involved and so many, big hearts giving to these projects to make them work. It's very fulfilling to participate in them.
Well, I know that the EWA, without them, we would not be able to have these relationships with these people, other folks that are like you, Kevin, in foreign countries. But the EWA is struggling to get their message out. I think that it's important for people that are not even landowners, people that don't own wildlife, but they do love and care for wildlife, to support associations like the EWA.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head. The Sahara Conservation Fund, EWA, these are the organizations that are out there not just talking about wildlife, not just raising money so they can file lawsuits. These are the people that have boots on the ground. Their membership own these animals. They own these iconic species and are responsible for taking care of them. And so supporting those organizations is about as direct a way of supporting wildlife as you possibly can without actually owning that wildlife yourself.
And Kevin, listen, I've got less than 30 seconds. We got to go to a hard break. Please stick around, folks. There is a way that you can support the EWA for free. Literally, they've got a free membership. Go to myewa.org, click on membership, sign up. We need your support to support great folks like Kevin Reid and the Marani River Ranch. All right, this is Alan Warren Outdoors. I'm going to ask Kevin about politics right after this. Man, time is flying. Hey, folks, welcome back. Alan Warren with you, with my good friend, Mr. Kevin Reid from the Marani River Ranch here in Texas. Kevin is he's a member of the Exotic Wildlife Association. He's a husband, a father, a landowner, and I guess maybe most importantly, he's a wildlife lover, and you can hear the passion in his voice. Kevin, I know that we've talked about politics off air before, and I want to get your take on what's going on and what's going to happen this next Tuesday, good or bad.
You know, I think most people will agree with me. It's the craziest election I've ever seen in my lifetime. I think there's a real shift in the thinking of the American people. I think they're frustrated. I think the economy, continues to be the thing that everybody thinks about the most, except the politicians. They talk about it the least, and that's what matters to the everyday people in the United States. So I think there's a shift occurring. I'm optimistic that people are finally waking up to a lot of the corruption on both parties. I think there's a systematic belief that once you get into Washington, D.C., you're entitled to a certain level of living, a certain level of benefits. And, when you see politicians, and I'm talking both sides, that have never done anything except be an elected official, walk away from office after 30 years with literally hundreds of millions of dollars, something's wrong with our system. And they're not being held accountable at the same level that the rest of us are. They're getting benefits that the rest of us aren't. And I don't think they're focused on the everyday American citizen and their needs and their families' needs to be prosperous and grow and be successful in the country. And I think the American people are finally figuring out Washington's broken. We need to fix it. I'm not sure how to fix it. Maybe start over. I don't know. But
well, I had a question. When are you going to run for office? You're so articulate with what you said. It is true. I don't know how anyone can argue, but it's broken, man. It is broken, and to not take an honest look, it's like weighing 500 pounds and being afraid to look at the scale and saying, hey, I'm okay, maybe a little bit, need to work. And we need to look at the scale and be honest with ourselves. So in the last minute or so, I want you to tell me, are you optimistic, or are you pessimistic, or some of both when you look into the future in terms of wildlife conservation? What do you think, Kevin?
I'm always optimistic. I'm just an optimistic guy. And I'm seeing a ground shift, especially here in the United States, where people that have, like the zoo system, for example, that for 40 years they've been trying to raise some of these iconic species and these endangered and threatened species, and they're just not. They're failing. And the reason they're failing is they don't have enough room. They're urban settings or small pens. And now we're developing a partnership through the Source Population Alliance with large landholders to do captive breeding successfully and to create source populations of all of these species that are in trouble. 5 years ago, that would have never happened. And we're starting to see a movement in that direction now. So I'm incredibly optimistic about wildlife, about Texas, about us being able to have a true impact on that wildlife.
In less than a minute, where do you see you and the Marani River Ranch in 5 to 10 years in terms of conservation? You got 80 species of animals now. You want more? You want less? I
think, we started a nonprofit called the Stewards of Wildlife Conservation, and we are raising money for these projects through that nonprofit organization. And I think what you're going to see us focus more on is the Source Population Alliance, where we're starting to breed some animals that other places can't. We've got a lot of room. We've got great habitat. We've got a great climate. So we're going to start focusing on helping people raise things that other people can't, with the long-term goal of getting those animals shipped back to their native land. And I call it reverse distinction. Now, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I don't know what will. But I'm fired up about reversing extinction by taking species from Texas and putting them back in their native habitat.
You are so incredibly not just passionate and intelligent, but you articulate the message of conservation so well, and I appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. Please join us again. I want to talk all about the rhinos. I want to talk about our need to communicate better with people that don't understand our message. So please accept this as an open invitation to join us anytime.
Well, I appreciate it, Alan. You know I love to talk about wildlife and conservation. I get pretty excited about it.
I know you do. You have a great weekend, Kevin Reid. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Alan. I appreciate it.
You bet. That was Kevin Reid, this hour's outdoor hero. What a guy, man, and what a story. If you want to find out more, go to MoraniRiver.com, MoraniRiver.com. If you'd like to take advantage of the free membership to the Exotic Wildlife Association, myewa.org. I'll be, let's see. Oh, Charlie Seal's up next. Y'all stick around. All right, Alan Warren, back with you. Sounds like my microphone's not acting right. Are we good? All right. I want to remind our listeners that you can nominate somebody that you believe qualifies as an outdoor hero, like Kevin Reid. Doesn't have to be somebody from Texas either. We would love to visit with more people from outside of Texas like we did last week. So if you know of somebody you think qualifies to be an outdoor hero, got a great story to tell, call us 24 hours a day. Leave us a voicemail. Tell us about them, how we can get a hold of them. Our toll-free number is 1-855-296-7469. All right, Charlie Seal, are you on with us?
I'm here, Alan.
Good deal. I know that Kevin Reid was on, and, man, he is so incredible. He actually went an extra segment this morning, but he's got, man, this guy is passionate, smart, and connected.
Well, I think, a week or so ago, Alan, you had on his son, and I tell you, what they do over at the Brownie River Ranch is just absolutely fantastic, with everything from endangered species to propagating the species that are, not threatened and endangered. So they are a true conservation ranch over there.
And what a great representative for wildlife and for the, for the people that love wildlife, for the EWA. Hey, tell us quickly about the victory. I mentioned earlier that there is a victory of sorts regarding the 3 species. What does that mean?
Well, we all along we knew that once the congressional mandate came down here a couple of years ago, Alan, that lifted the requirements for permits on the scimitar horned oryx, addax, and dama gazelle, we knew that probably was going to be challenged, and we were right. It was challenged by the Friends of Animals, which is an animal rights group out of the Northeast, and they challenged the validity and the constitutionality of the congressional mandate, actually. And finally, it worked its way through the courts. All the sides presented their case to the judge of why it should be appealed and why it was unconstitutional. And we finally got notified this week, Alan, that the judge knocked down their appeal, and the case is finally finalized. And the 3 species, the congressional mandate will stay on them, and they will thrive like we've been doing for years.
That is such good news. I mean, it's good news in more than just saving the animals and helping the animals, but I think it's great news for EWA. You don't have to spend as much money fighting these antis.
Well, it's wonderful news for us, and that's what EWA does is conservation through commerce. And without a value on these animals, and our listeners have heard us talk about this before, and not just these animals, but you take the value away from anything out here, whether it's horses, cattle, anything, and they're going to be gone. They're going to the ranchers are not going to raise them if there's no value in raising them.
With the election coming up next Tuesday, I was wondering, why do you think it is that almost everybody that hunts, especially people that hunt on private land, why are they all conservatives, or most of them conservatives?
I think that for the most part, it goes back to our rural roots, our conservation, our conservative roots, actually. And And I think that it's about conservatism is more. It's about private property rights. It's about God, country, and doing the things that are right. And so I think that's why you see that particular group of people that are involved more in the hunting and the things that we do.
Well, when you compare hunting on private land versus hunting on public land, they say the greatest thing about hunting on public land, we have a lot of listeners out west, the best thing about public land is it's public land. And the worst thing about hunting on public land is it is public land. And when you go from hunting on public land generally and you hunt now on private land, it's hard to go back to hunting that public land because there's just the difference is night and day in terms of quality of game and the quality of the experience. And I think that the individual, that's what I'm hearing you say, the individual is more effective at helping wildlife and being a better steward than any government agency ever could be.
Well, you're exactly right on target, and nothing against the public land because I hunted and I know you've hunted public land for years, but you're right. Once you hunt private land and see what can be done through managing that property and the quality of the animals that are managed there. I mean, on public land, Alan, it's pretty indiscriminate. A guy goes out, spends his money, buys a license, and he wants to bring meat home, and it doesn't matter the age of that meat or the age of that animal, and that's just the reverse on public or private land because we manage that. We want to take our mature animals, the ones that have passed their prime, and so that's why I think private land is a better choice.
Well, I agree, but for a lot of people out west, you don't have a whole lot of options. But public land, it's beautiful and it's big, and some of it still is very, very good. Charlie, but before we get out of here, what are your thoughts in terms of if Trump does win, and I believe he's going to win, how quickly can we expect changes in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the USDA? You think it's going to take forever? It's going to go pretty quick?
I heard a stat yesterday, Alan, saying that about 25% of the federal workers say they will leave if Trump is elected. Well, you got to take out a lot of those that are already up for retirement and things like that. But Trump has promised some very strong changes in the administration, in the overall government itself within the first 100 days. I think he's going to name his cabinet. I think within the first 100 days, you'll see a new Secretary of the Interior, and we hope that it's somebody friendly to our cause and the conservation that we and recognizes the conservation that the private landowners out here do for these threatened and endangered species.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm optimistic, and I know you are too. Tell everybody how they can get their free membership and learn more about the Exotic Wildlife Association.
Alan, go straight to our website. It's myewa.org, myewa.org. Click on the membership button. There's several levels there. And our free membership is the auxiliary membership. You can click on that, and it's you get our alerts, you get access to our online magazine, and a really cool black buck decal.
Yeah, myewa.org, and even for people who don't own land, you don't own wildlife, but you care about wildlife and you want to support the good guys, go to myewa.org. Charlie Seal, I got to let you go. I know this was a short segment, but we're going to catch up with it next week, and hopefully we're going to have some good news to talk about with Donald Trump.
All right, very good, my friend, and we're fixing to take some hunters out here in just a few minutes, start to get daylight, and we're going to be in the blinds here in just a little bit.
You be safe and have a good weekend. We'll talk to you again soon. This is Alan Warren Outdoors. One more segment to go. Stick around. All right, this is our last show before the big election next Tuesday, and I am cautiously optimistic that Mr. Trump is going to be our winner. I think the decision will be made very early next Tuesday night because there's so many people, so many more people this election that are paying attention. They're paying attention, and they're more aware of the political payoffs and games that our elected officials have been playing. And, it's just crazy. Before we close out the program, I did hear a funny joke. I want to share it. Some of y'all probably heard it, but I want to share it with you.
We like when you tell us
All right.
that.
So Hillary Clinton goes into a gifted student school, and she wants to talk and answer questions and meet the little kids. And one little boy puts up his hand and has some questions to ask. And Hillary says, asks, well, what's your name? He says, Kenny. Well, what is your question, Kenny? He says, well, I've got 3 questions. First, whatever happened in Benghazi? Second, why would you run for president after your husband shamed the office? And third, whatever happened to the missing $6 billion when you were Secretary of State? And just then, the bell rings for recess. Hillary, she tells the kids that they can continue after recess. When they come back in, Hillary says, oh, okay, now where were we? Oh, that's right. It was question time. Who's got a question? A different little boy, Johnny, puts up his hand. What's your name, little boy? My name's Johnny. Well, Johnny, what's your question? Well, I've got 5 questions. First, whatever happened in Benghazi? Second, why would you run for president after your husband shamed the office? Third, whatever happened to the $6 billion while you were running for Secretary of State? Fourth, why did the recess bell go off 20 minutes early? And fifth, where's Kenny?
Oh, that's good. I'm stealing that.
I thought it was pretty cute.
I'm stealing that. I like that.
All right, all kidding aside, next Tuesday is in no uncertain terms going to be the direction. It's going to decide the direction we're going. We're going to continue going down the road we're on, or will, as we say, as Trump says, drain the swamp and get our country moving again. If you're one of the undecideds or you know somebody that is an undecided, please suggest that they watch the movie Hillary's America. It is not a movie that's really about Hillary. It's more of a history movie that will enlighten you more than I can begin to say. Let me tell you something. I've seen it many times. It's the only movie I've ever gone to that when the credits began at the end, that people stood up and saluted. Many of them had tears in their eyes. Absolutely amazing. It will make the average American some kind of proud. The movie actually ends with a song that we're going to play right now. It represents how so many of us feel about electing a person, well, about electing Hillary Clinton. For the record, we are not opposed to a woman being president, just not this woman. Until next week, I'm Alan Warren. Thanks so much for listening. Please remember to vote on Tuesday and pray. Pray for God to continue to bless America.
I've got so sick and tired of listening to what you got to say. I decided I just got to stand up and say so. Sick and tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired of being treated this way. So I made my choice, gonna raise my voice and say it's time for you to pack up and go. You know who you are, you're lying so and so. I'm gonna stand up and say so.